Välkommen allesammen! The Nordic Bronze Age. This is going to be a long and very entertaining video. I've said before that the Viking Age is actually not my favorite period in Scandinavian history. The Bronze Age actually is. As a matter of fact, the Nordic Bronze Age is my favorite period in the whole world of any time, and in my opinion, the best time and place to be alive that ever was. This is for many reasons. I touched on this a little bit in my last video that I did on the Bronze Age at Isterhagen, a burial mound from the Bronze Age in my hometown in Norway. But this video I'm going to break it down in a bit more detail with each of these points and why the Bronze Age was so great for all these reasons. And this video is maybe going to reveal a little bit too much info about myself and my thoughts and what I consider a healthy society. Some people are probably not going to like it, but I hope I can convince some of you at least that humans had it just perfect right around 3,500 years ago. So buckle up and let's take a trip back to the Nordic Bronze Age. This is going to be a long one and a good one. This is my favorite video. This is going to be my favorite video out of all the ones I've done, but it's going to be long. I hope you guys can stick with it through the end because there is some very, very important info here. It's also going to be a little bit different than most of my videos because I always go over the written sources usually. The Bronze Age, there are none. Nothing at all from that time period, and almost nothing from other time periods of places describing the north of Europe in their Bronze Age. So the evidence that we have to use to make conclusions about the Nordic Bronze Age are pretty much just the archaeological finds. And we can also compare and contrast the Bronze Ages in other similar cultures and their written evidence, like the ancient Greek, for example, and use that to basically develop theories about how things may have been in the north of Europe. And actually, the answer appears that these two cultures were actually very, very similar. And this is the main thing I want you guys to take away from this. I just want this picture to be pushed into your heads before we start. Don't think of like 3,000, 4,000 years ago, like Greece and Rome at the time were the civilized ones, and the north of Europe were just a bunch of barbarians. The truth is that we were pretty much equal in technology, civilization, and development. I want you to think of the Nordic Bronze Age more like ancient Greece, just with a little bit of northern barbarian flavor to it. Of course it was different, but the key points are going to be very, very similar of these two societies. So first, let's talk about the time period. The time period we are looking at here is about a little after 2000 BC until about 500 BC. This is what is considered the Nordic Bronze Age. And all the Bronze Age means is that we start to see a progression into a new age and new technology. It's when Neolithic, hunter-gatherer type cultures turn into Bronze Age cultures, and early signs of civilization, as they call it, start to come up, and new technology that gives them an upper edge over the hunter-gatherer or Neolithic type cultures. One of the main examples is the discovery of how to make bronze. This is the main advancement here, and that's why we call it the Bronze Age. But just remember, different cultures go through their Bronze Age at different time periods. The Nordic areas got to it a bit later than the ancient Greeks or the Chinese, for example. Some cultures in the world still haven't evolved out of their Neolithic cultures, but I don't like to call it evolve at all, as I will explain in a minute. But let's get on to the traits now that made the Bronze Age so great. Number one, the weather. Climate. The Nordic Bronze Age began with a climate change, starting quite a bit before, around 2700 BC, and the temperature of the northern hemisphere started to get warmer then. And by the start of the Bronze Age, the climate in Scandinavia was actually comparable to that of modern-day Germany and northern France. Yes, back then it was even warmer than the climate is today, and it allowed for good opportunities for population growth and farming, plenty of food, and things like that. For example, we find traces that grapes were grown in Scandinavia at this time. So lots of that is just one of the many signs that the temperature climate of the Nordic Bronze Age was actually higher than it is today. You can also see some other evidence here, like this woman's Bronze Age outfit. It looks very comfortable. Short skirt, looks like a nice summer day. This is not something people wore if it was freezing outside. Some other archaeological evidence is these rock carvings that we see all over Scandinavia. Now, originally they were carved at sea level at the time, and today these are up above the sea level about 25 meters. So this is going to be hard for some people to believe, and I can already see some people are going to get butthurt about it. Yes, it was quite a bit warmer, and the sea level was a lot higher for long periods of time in the Bronze Age. This is, it's always open to debates. I've seen different archaeologists and scientists debating these things, but definitely on average it was higher than it was today, the temperature and the water levels. This is what most people don't understand about history, guys. Warm periods are not something that humans, especially in the north of Europe, were worried about. Cold periods were the biggest catastrophe and the biggest fear and the worst things that could happen. During warm periods throughout history, there's plenty of life and food and development, and it's comfortable. Ancient humans, of course, maybe living in the desert, might have a different idea of this. They would probably want it cooler, but for the people in the north of Europe, warm periods were comfortable and flourishing, and this was the Bronze Age warm period. Cool periods were the real problem throughout human history. When the cold comes, when the world gets colder, the north of Europe gets filled with famine, death, war, suffering, all these bad things every single time. Now, the Earth cooled down towards the end of the Bronze Age, about 600 to 700 BC, when the Bronze Age ended and when we have some bad things happen that I won't go into in this video. Then it got warm again, and it cooled down again, and this brought the Dark Ages in about the 400s AD. Then the weather got warmer, like in the Viking Age. This was the medieval warm period. Then it happened again. It got cooler in the 12 to 1300s. Now, currently, we're in a warm period, but these things, these cool periods, these catastrophes come up every 1,000 years or so, and the result every single time is a dark age of disease and death and depression and suffering for humans, especially in the northern regions of the world. So the climate in the Bronze Age was actually very, very comfortable and a great time to be alive, like today is.